HNF 440 ServSafe exam questions. The temperature danger zone refers to which range of temperatures? 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature danger zone is between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside this temperature range, pathogens can multiply, but outside this temperature range, their ability to multiply is significantly reduced. This is why we store foods either hot or cold until they are served. A faucet that supplies clean drinking water is fitted with a flexible hose to fill a mop bucket. A careless employee leaves the end of the hose in a bucket of dirty mop water overnight. Due to changing air pressure within the building's plumbing system, the dirty mop water moves up the hose and into the faucet, contaminating the clean drinking water. What is this type of contamination called? Cross-connection. Cross-connection happens when a clean water supply is accidentally connected to a dirty water supply, usually through a hose or an incorrectly installed faucet. Which government authority is responsible for writing the codes that regulate food service operations? State and local health departments. The FDA, USDA, and CDC are directly involved with many food safety regulations, but local jurisdictions are not forced to strictly adhere to their recommendations. A pathogen is considered what type of contaminant? Biological. A dish that includes previously cooked TCS ingredients should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius for 1 second, instantaneous. Biological contaminants. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, and toxins, poisons, produced by some seafood, mushrooms, and plants. What is a backflow prevention device intended for? Preventing cross-connection. When receiving a shipment of milk, eggs or live shellfish, the air temperature of the shipping container should be 45 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The exceptions to this rule are milk, eggs, live shellfish, and shucked shellfish. These foods may be received at an air temperature of 45 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Which of the following would require obtaining a variance from your regulatory authority? Offering live shellfish from a display tank. Document issued by your regulatory authority that allows a regulatory requirement to be waived or changed. What is the minimum internal temperature that raw roasts, pork, beef, veal, and lamb should be cooked to for at least 4 minutes before serving? 145 degrees Fahrenheit. A roast is a large and thick cut of meat and should be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 4 minutes. Because it's much larger than other cuts, it requires more time to ensure that it is cooked thoroughly. Which of the following symptoms is most commonly associated with foodborne illness? Diarrhea. You are reheating a TCS food from the cooler for immediate service to a guest. Assuming that the food was originally cooked and cooled correctly, what is the minimum temperature that the food must be heated to before serving? You can safely serve it at any temperature as long as the food was previously cooked and cooled properly, and as long as it will be immediately served, it does not need to be reheated. Poultry should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius for 1 second, instantaneous. In order from left to right, what should be placed in a 3-compartment sink for manual dishwashing? Detergent and water, clean water, sanitizing solution. 1. Wash with the appropriate detergent and water. 2. Rinse with clean water. 3. Sanitize with an appropriate sanitizing solution. All items should be stored away from the walls and how many inches from the floor? 6 inches. Raw ground beef and pork should be cooked to an internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit for how many seconds before serving? 17 seconds. All ground and mechanically tenderized meats, except poultry, stuffed meat, and stuffing made with meat, should be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 17 seconds. Jaundice, a yellowing of the skin and eyes, is usually caused by which foodborne illness? Hepatitis A. Physical contaminants. chicken bones, glass, dirt, or bag ties that may accidentally fall into food. In the case of bones, some foods, soup for example, usually should not contain bones. You are receiving a delivery of cold TCS food. In most cases, what maximum temperature should the food be received at? Not including shellfish, shell eggs, and milk. 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Which person is the most susceptible to foodborne illness? A 65-year-old man. Preschool-age children, the elderly and people with a compromised immune system are at the highest risk for foodborne illness. What is a commonly used chemical sanitizer? Iodine, chlorine, and quaternary ammonium compounds. If you are packaging fish using a reduced oxygen packaging method, ROP, the fish must include a label stating what? That it must remain frozen until used. Which is an example of a physical contaminant? Bones in chili. What type of establishment should not serve raw seed sprouts? A senior living home. Seed sprouts are grown in warm and humid conditions, and these are also the conditions where E. coli and Salmonella thrive. You are reheating previously cooked TCS food from the cooler that will be hot held for service to guests. Assuming that the food was originally cooked and cooled correctly, what is the minimum temperature that the food must be reheated to before being hot held? 165 degrees Fahrenheit for any amount of time. Which unused items may be reserved to another customer? Prepackaged items such as soup crackers. Which of the following is not considered a TCS food? Bread. How should a cloth used for wet wiping be stored? In a bucket of sanitizing solution. To effectively heat sanitize equipment, it must be soaked for at least 30 seconds in hot water. That is what minimum temperature? 171 degrees Fahrenheit. If you will be holding a cold food for service without temperature control, what is the maximum amount of time that the food may remain in the temperature danger zone before it must be served or thrown out? 6 hours. Cold-held TCS foods are allowed to remain in the temperature danger zone for 6 hours. What should you do if food shipments are not delivered at the correct temperatures? Reject the delivery. Which type of jewelry are you allowed to wear during food preparation? A plain band ring. Mechanically tenderized meat should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 155 degrees Fahrenheit 68 degrees Celsius for 17 seconds. Mechanically tenderized meat should be cooked to an internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 17 seconds. What is the first step when cleaning and sanitizing stationary equipment? Unplug the equipment. 1. Unplug the equipment. 2. Take off the removable parts and wash, rinse and sanitize them by hand or in a dishwasher if approved by the manufacturer. 3. Scrape to remove food and other particles from the equipment surfaces. 4. Wash the surfaces with an appropriate cleaning solution using a tool such as a cloth towel, nylon brush, or abrasive pad. 5. Rinse the surfaces with clean water using a cloth towel or other appropriate tool. 6. Sanitize all surfaces with the correct sanitizing solution according to the manufacturer's recommendations. 7. Allow all surfaces to completely air dry, then reassemble the equipment. Surface probes. These are used to take the temperature of flat surfaces, like a griddle. Injected or brined meats such as ham should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 155 degrees Fahrenheit 68 degrees Celsius for 17 seconds. Meat injected with flavoring and brined meats such as ham should be cooked to 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 17 seconds. You are receiving a delivery of shucked shellfish. What maximum air temperature should the shellfish be received at? 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Most cold TCS foods should be received at a maximum air temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit, but shellfish, milk, and shell eggs are an exception. Which activity requires a food handler to wear single-use gloves? Handling ready-to-eat foods. If you will be holding the hot food for service without temperature control, what is the maximum amount of time that the food may remain in the temperature danger zone before it must be served or thrown out? 4 hours. What is the easiest and safest way to calibrate a thermometer? Adjusting the thermometer so that ice water shows a temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit over time. Thermometers can lose their accuracy, and they should be calibrated regularly. And any time the thermometer is dropped or jostled, it should be calibrated again. You are taking a previously cooked TCS food from the cooler for immediate service to a guest. As long as the food was cooked and cooled correctly, to what temperature must the food be reheated before being served? It can be served at any temperature as long as the previously cooked TCS food was cooked and cooled correctly. It can be immediately served to a guest at any temperature. What is the minimum internal temperature that raw fish, seafood, shellfish, and crustaceans should be cooked to for at least 15 seconds before serving? 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Raw freshwater fish, seafood, shellfish, and crustaceans should be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 15 seconds. When is a foodborne illness considered an outbreak? When at least 2 people experience the same symptoms after eating the same food. The acronym ALERT stands for Assure, Look, Employee, Report, and Threat. What type of food safety risk does this refer to? The deliberate contamination of food. Ground, chopped, or minced seafood should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 155 degrees Fahrenheit 68 degrees Celsius for 17 seconds. Normally seafood only needs to be cooked to 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds, but if it's chopped, minced, or ground it requires a higher temperature. Which symptom should cause a sick employee to be excluded from a food service establishment? Vomiting. An immersion probe thermometer is used for checking the temperature of what? The temperature of liquids such as soups, sauces, and frying oil. What is the best way to ensure the proper concentration of chemical sanitizers? Use a test kit. Where should the scoop for the ice machine be stored between uses? In a protected and designated location. A cold storage unit must have a reliable thermometer. Where should the thermometer be located? Near the warmest part of the unit. What is the FIFO method, first in, first out? Storing food items so that the oldest is used first. Why must ground meats be cooked to a higher temperature than whole cuts of meat? More pathogens reside on the outside of meat and grinding redistributes the pathogens throughout the meat. Which of the following is not considered to be one of the big 8 allergens? Onions, milk, soy, eggs, wheat, some kinds of fish, some kinds of seafood, peanuts, and tree nuts are the 8 most common allergens. How often should a soft-serve yogurt machine be cleaned and sanitized? Once a day. Penetration probes. These are used to take the temperature of thin foods, like hamburger patties or fish fillets. Which of the following is considered by the regulatory authority to be an imminent health hazard? All of these are considered to be an imminent health hazard because they pose a significant threat to health that needs to be corrected immediately. What or who is the most responsible for training new staff about safe food handling practices? The Certified Food Manager. If a TCS food will be hot held for service, what is the minimum internal temperature that this food must maintain while being held? 135 degrees Fahrenheit. TCS food that is being hot held for service should maintain a temperature of at least 135 degrees Fahrenheit. And if the food falls below 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 hours or more, it should be thrown out. What is a grease trap? A plumbing fixture that prevents grease buildup from blocking drains. Where is the best place to store cleaning tools and chemicals? In an area that is used only for this purpose. Which symptom must be reported to your regulatory authority when it afflicts a food handler? Jaundice. Which type of pathogen is not normally destroyed by freezing or cooking and must be prevented through good personal hygiene? Viruses. What is a thermocouple? A metal probe thermometer. What is the best example of the fecal-oral route of contamination? A food handler does not wash their hands after using the restroom. When cooling a hot TCS food for cold storage, how quickly must you bring the temperature down from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or lower? 2 hours. The food should be brought down from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours. Seafood should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 145 degrees Fahrenheit 63 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds. Seafood should be cooked to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Seafood includes both freshwater and saltwater fish, as well as shellfish and crustaceans. When cooking a T-bone steak, where should you insert a penetration probe thermometer to check its temperature? In the thickest part of the meat. Air probes. These are used to take the air temperature of coolers and ovens. Hot TCS food needs to be cooled before storage. What is the maximum amount of time you should allow when bringing food down from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to the storage temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower? 6 hours. The TCS food must be cooled from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours. Then, the TCS food must be cooled from 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower within 4 hours. A commercially processed TCS food item is delivered to your establishment with a use-by date that is less than 7 days from the day of delivery. What should you do? Clearly mark the package with the use-by date. A food handler has a wound or a boil on their hand or wrist. What is an appropriate course of action? Wear an impermeable bandage and cover with a single-use glove. How long can raw TCS food remain in the temperature danger zone before it must be served or thrown out? 4 hours hot and raw equals 4 hours cold equals 6 hours. What is a TCS food? Food that requires time and temperature control for safety. TCS foods are foods that require time/temperature control for safety. What is the best approach to dealing with pests? Deny pests food, water, and shelter. Work with a licensed pest control operator, PCO. Deny pests access to the operation. Roasts of pork, beef, veal, and lamb should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 145 degrees Fahrenheit 63 degrees Celsius for 4 minutes. A roast is a large and thick cut of meat and requires the longest cooking time to ensure that it is cooked thoroughly. Roasts of pork, beef, veal, and lamb should be cooked to 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 minutes. Food from plants that will be hot held for service should be cooked to what temperature? 135 degrees Fahrenheit. If a TCS food will be cold held for service, what is the maximum temperature that this food could be held? 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Foods should be stored so that those requiring a higher internal cooking temperature are on the lower shelves. This is to prevent cross-contamination if foods on the top shelf drip or leak onto the food stored below it. From top to bottom, which is a correct storage arrangement? 1. Ready-to-eat food. 2. Seafood. 3. Whole cuts of beef or pork. 4. Ground meats. 5. Whole and ground poultry. Steaks or chops of commercially raised game should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 145 degrees Fahrenheit 63 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds. Hand washing stations are required in which area? In food prep, service, and dishwashing areas. Which of the following is not considered to be cross-contamination? Leaving foods in the temperature danger zone for too long. Cross-contamination occurs when a food or a food contact surface comes into contact with something that is contaminated. Stuffing that includes fish, meat, or poultry as an ingredient should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 165 degrees Fahrenheit 74 degrees Celsius for 1 second, instantaneous. Which of the following is not considered an example of a corrective action? Asking a customer who is ordering an alcoholic beverage for ID. A corrective action is when a food handler discovers an unsafe practice and takes action to stop it and prevent it from happening again. These conditions are necessary for the growth of bacteria, food, acidity, temperature, time, oxygen, and moisture. What term is often used for these conditions? Fat Tom. Chemical contaminants. Cleaning agents, insecticides, and polishes. You are receiving a shipment of shell eggs still in the shell. What is the maximum air temperature that the shell eggs should be received at? 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Most cold TCS foods should be received at a maximum temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit, but shell eggs, milk, and shellfish are an exception. Which of the following is an acceptable method for improving the appearance of food? The way food appears can be a clue as to if it's safe to eat or not. For this reason, you should never improve the appearance of food by artificial means. Which of the following is an acceptable method for cooling hot TCS food before storage? In an ice water bath. Bimetallic stem thermometer. These are the most common of all food thermometers. Every food service establishment should have several of them. Although they can be used for many things, they are best for taking the temperature of thick foods. When is a food service operation able to hold or display TCS foods without temperature control? After receiving approval in advance by the regulatory authority. A dishwashing machine should have the ability to measure which of the following? ServSafe recommends using an automatic dishwasher that measures water temperature, water pressure, and the concentrations of chemical cleaners and sanitizers. What is the proper sequence to effectively sanitize dishware, utensils, and equipment? Scrape, wash, rinse, sanitize, air dry. Shellfish and crustaceans should be cooked to what minimum internal temperature? 145 degrees Fahrenheit 63 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds. Clams, scallops, oysters, mussels, shrimp, crayfish, crab, and lobster. These foods should be cooked to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Which of the following is not considered a safe way to thaw frozen meat? Under hot running water. E. coli is usually contracted from which food? Ground beef. Coving is recommended for food service establishments. What is it? A curved and sealed edge between the floor and wall, intended to make cleaning easier and more effective. The temperature of food stored in hot holding has dropped into the temperature danger zone for a period of 2 hours. What should be done? Quickly bring the food to the correct temperature for safety. Hot food should never fall below 135 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 4 hours, and if it does, it should be thrown out. What is the minimum internal temperature that raw poultry should be heated to before serving? 165 degrees Fahrenheit for less than 1 second. In which temperature range do pathogens grow the most rapidly? 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Which of the following is considered a common risk factor that may lead to foodborne illness? Time temperature abuse, cross-contamination, poor personal hygiene, and poor cleaning/sanitizing.